Okay, it's nighttime. Our bread dough has been on the counter all day long. It's nice and bubbly and yummy. And we are now ready to get all of our ingredients together to make our bread dough. Okay, for our sourdough bread, we need 6 cups of bread flour, all-purpose bread flour. You can also use regular all-purpose flour. I have baked with both. I'm sure bread flour has something special in it, but I've used regular all-purpose flour as well, and the results have been just fine. So 6 cups of all-purpose flour, plus I leave about a cup out so that I can put that down on the counter when I'm ready to knead the dough. The rest of our dry ingredients is 1 teaspoon of salt and half a cup of sugar. I mentioned before that it seems like we're adding a lot of sugar to this bread, and it is a somewhat sweet bread, but the amount of sugar is for the yeast and the organisms in the starter. Our wet ingredients is going to be half a cup of oil. I have been using unflavored coconut oil that is a liquid at room temperature, but you can use any kind of oil. And then we need 1.5 cups of very hot water. Again, this is hot water from your tap, as hot as it gets from your tap. There's no need to heat it on the stove or boil it. It just needs to be as hot as you can get it. Last but not least, the magic ingredient is our liquid starter that we've had sitting out all day. It's nice and bubbly. It smells really good. Very yeasty and bread-like. So these are our ingredients that we need, and we're going to start mixing them. Set this over here. So we take our bread flour, going to add our 1 teaspoon of salt, half a cup of sugar, half a cup of oil, 1.5 cups of hot water, and our 1 whole cup of the liquid starter. So I am going to start pouring this. First I'm going to stir it around a little bit. The potato flakes and the sugar like to settle at the bottom, so we just want to stir this really nicely. Then we're going to measure out 1 cup. Yep, that looks pretty good. And there's a good bit left. So what you're going to do with what's left is it goes in a jar or some type of container. I like using glass, but I don't guess it has to be glass. 1 cup goes in the glass. I usually add just a little bit more than 1 cup. The 1 cup line is right here. The rest gets tossed. So then what you do with this is that you put a lid on this jar, and then you put this in the refrigerator. This becomes your starter that you will feed again in 3 to 5 days or a little bit longer. And this is what you will use to bake off of the next time you bake your bread. So I'm just going to leave this here for now. And we're going to come back over here. We got our beautiful starter. Pour that right in. And then we're gonna mix. Okay, we've mixed our dough up. As you can see, this looks really good. There's not a whole lot sticking to the sides of the bowl. It's nice and squishy. Sometimes I get too much liquid in it, so it'll be kind of gooey. Sometimes I get a little bit too much flour in it, and so it'll be kind of stiff and there'll be flour at the bottom, but today I got it pretty good. Now we're going to take this and we're going to dump it on our floured surface. This is where our extra flour comes in. Alright, here's our bread dough that has been setting out all night. You can see how much it has risen. This recipe usually rises really well, really big, so it looks good. I'm going to take some flour and put out on our countertop or wherever it is that you are going to be. Okay, so we have our dough put on our floury surface. I mentioned that sometimes when I make bread, the dough can be a little squishy based on adding too much liquid, or sometimes it can be a little too floury. It's not really going to matter a whole lot once you get it on your floured surface, especially if it's a little too liquidy, because you'll work the flour in. So I just knead the bread dough until I feel like it's somewhat smooth and until it's not real sticky. There's different lengths of time depending on how the dough turned out from the bowl. So obviously if I had too much liquid, then I would have to knead longer to work more flour in. And if I had a little bit more flour than what I needed, then I wouldn't have to work it so much because it would already be full of flour. Also, depending on the weather and how much humidity is in the air, that can affect how the bread feels once you've turned it into dough. Sometimes the bread dough feels really soft and smooth. More often than not, it is a lot thicker and more compact. It's just about done. Okay, usually at this point, I set the bread here and I take the bowl that I made the bread dough in and I wash it out in hot soapy water. That does two things for me. I'm not having to use a whole lot of bowls in the process, so it saves me on dishes later. The other thing it does is, because I've washed it in hot water and rinsed it in hot water, then the bowl itself is a little warm, and so when the bread dough goes in, then it has a nice warm place and the yeast can start to work and rise. So that's what I've done here. Spray the inside of it with a non-stick spray. Take your bread dough, flop it in, and then you want to turn it upside down so that the top is also greased. So we take the bowl here and we do the same thing that we did earlier, and we fed the starter. We want to cover it. Nice and snug. I haven't had any issues with flies or gnats getting into the dough once the dough has been made. It just doesn't have the same appeal as the starter does. It doesn't smell as sweet and sugary. So I just put some tin foil on this And I set it right back in the same spot on the counter that I put the starter. And since it's nighttime, this will sit on the counter all night long. Again, the instructions say 8 to 12 hours. However, mine sometimes sits longer. The only thing it'll do is continue to rise. It doesn't ruin the bread. So in the morning, after it has been rising all night, that is when I will turn it back onto a floured surface and knead it. And then I cut it in half and make 2 loaves out of it. So I will see you in the morning.